Today, Margaret Mitchell will share one of her own hard-won lessons. This speech is based on project number 2 in the Competent Communicator Manual. It is 5 to 7 minutes long and is entitled, What Dr. Brewster Taught Me. Please welcome Margaret Mitchell.
Making the decision to go back to school to complete my college degree was not an easy decision to make. I was 30 years old, I was married, and I was the mother of a 4-year-old daughter. I remember saying to my own mother, "Mom, I'm 30 years old." I thought that was old. What am I going to do sitting in this classroom with a bunch of 18 and 20 years olds? And she said, well, it's better to be 30 years old and working on getting your degree than 30 years old and working on nothing. With that wise counsel, I enrolled at Cal State LA. At that time, Cal State LA had a state-of-the-art preschool right there on campus. I could drop my daughter off before heading off to classes, and I could pick her up after my classes were over. It was an ideal situation. I needn't have worried about competing with those younger students. I had grown up a lot since I had dropped out of school. For one thing, I was no longer worried about dating, about having an expansive social life. I was actually focused on getting an education. I enjoyed my classes. I woke up every morning excited about going to class. I was a literature major and I loved every single class. But there was one dark cloud on the horizon, and his name was Dr. Brewster. Dr. Brewster was a middle-aged man with a pallid complexion, icy blue eyes, steel gray straight hair, and a supercilious, arrogant air of intellectual superiority. He was the least favorite of all my instructors. On the first day of class, he said, "You upperclassmen think you know English literature. Well, let me tell you a thing or two. If you are fortunate, you will, like most of my students, perhaps get out of my class with a C. Very, very few of you may finish my class with a B. And no one will finish with an A." Well, I thought to myself, we'll see about that. Meanwhile, cracks were beginning to appear in my marriage. Those cracks had begun actually before I had even started school. But after school, those little cracks began to widen into chasms. I found it increasingly impossible to be an attentive wife, a good mother, an impeccable housekeeper, and a successful student. Something I knew just had to give. One evening, after I put my daughter on into bed, I'd spread my books out on the dining room table, and I'd settled in for a long evening of study. The dishes were sitting in the sink in the kitchen, and as I sat there, my husband, James, came and said, So what are you going to do? Are you going to wash those dishes? Or are you going to sit there reading poetry?
Oh.
That's what I said. So, after a moment, I said, well, you know, you have 3 degrees, and I don't even have 1. So I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let those dishes sit there tonight, and I'm going to study. And when I've taken my last final, 2 weeks from today, I'm going to pack my little things, and I'm going to move, and you can keep this house just as clean as you like it. For the next 2 weeks, I settled into my studies as fully as I could. And I took my finals. I was taking 4 classes. I aced those first 3 finals. My last final was in DrBrewster's class. I went to that class, and I was so prepared. There were 5 essay questions on that test. I looked at those questions. I said, oh, I've got this. I sat down. I started to write my first question. And suddenly, my mind went blank. As soon as I would formulate a thought, it would just pass out of mind. All I could think about was my daughter, Artie, and how I was going to explain to her that I would no longer be with her adored father. At the end of the class, I turned in my exam book, and it was blank except for my name. Mm-hmm. I said to Dr. Brewster, may I speak to you a moment? And he said, certainly, come to my office. And so I followed him. Once there, I told him my pitiful little story. I told him about my marriage ending. I told him about my desire to finish my education. And I begged him, may I please take this exam again? And he said, I'm sorry, but I can't let you do that. And then he said, you know, people are very, very strong, but they are also very, very fragile. Sometimes, when life is too much for them, they simply break. I'm sorry, Margaret, I cannot let you take this exam again. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I will give you a B. A B? Dr. Brewster! And I burst into tears. Well, that's not good enough for you, he said. Well, then I'll just have to give you an A. My tears turned into a flood. And that is how it is that a man from whom I expected nothing taught me an important lesson and gave me a gift that I have never, ever forgotten.